This week on Quality Digest Live, we chat with Annette Franz-Glenecki about the third rail of customer service. My co-host this week, sitting in for the vacationing Dirk Ducharme, is our CEO, Jeff Dewar. Jeff, what are you going to be covering on today's show?
We're going to talk about systems and culture and overcoming the big company syndrome.
Great. Well, that and more when we come back.
Today's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is Hexagon Metrology. Hexagon carries the widest range of quality brands. With an extensive support network, Hexagon is also your partner. Hexagon Metrology. We are metrology.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for January 17th, 2014. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Jeff Dewar, CEO of Quality Digest, and I'm up here in our North Quality Digest office in Seattle, Washington.
That's right, and Jeff, you're filling in for Dirk Ducharme. Dirk is on vacation, as he often is. I think he's actually down in Disneyland today, believe it or not. Wow, look, there he is at the Lego studio, the Lego store, I guess, in Disney. He looks very happy. You'd almost think that he would rather be on vacation than working. I don't know what that's all about.
I don't know. I think he looks like one of the cast members there. He's
definitely goofy, no doubt about it. Well, we're happy to have you with us today, Jeff, and we're going to kick off the show with a new article from Dawn Marie Bailey of the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. Dawn's article, Adapting Baldrige to the Housing Industry, appeared in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. The National Housing Quality Award, or the NHQA, is an award and education program closely modeled after the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award. Like the Baldrige, the NHQA program involves a rigorous evaluation process. NHQA examiners are industry experts and veterans who closely review and score each and every award application. The highest scoring applicants then receive site visits to validate results and look for opportunities for improvement. The results of the program are impressive. A study of NHQA winners from the program's inception in 1993 showed that the program helped builders improve gross profits, more accurately predict actual construction costs versus budget, reduce cycle time, achieve zero defects, and increase referral rates. So the moral of the story, Jeff, I think, is that good practices that work can easily be adapted across sectors. The framework of any improvement system, whether it be Baldrige or ISO, Lean, or anything else, I think has to be flexible enough to accommodate different industries and different processes.
That's right. I mean, this is a 17-page, 147 questions. So obviously there's a lot of nuance that could be built in there. Like, for example, in the Baldrige criteria focuses very sharply on suppliers. However, this particular award criteria focuses on trade relationships, which is much more natural to the housing industry. So they've adapted it in a way that makes sense for their particular use.
Yeah, it's rigorous, but it's not prescriptive. I think that's kind of the point here, and it's the point I think with a lot of these systems. If they're going to be used properly, they've got to be flexible enough to accommodate people that want to use them. In other words, again, not prescriptive. They don't necessarily say, you've got to do it this way. What they do is they try to encompass it so that it's easier for people to come into it. Of course, you need to meet the criteria, but it needs to be flexible enough to accommodate your individual industry, your individual company, I think.
Yeah, and I think that flexibility serves industry well, particularly from an American perspective. We have this syndrome of not invented here, NIH, and I think that the same thing applies from an industry to industry perspective. They look at something like the Baldrige and say, well, this doesn't really make sense exactly. They get the general idea, but then there's resistance that tends to build about it. So by changing it, you tend to overcome that resistance to acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. So really what we're talking about here, and it leads into our next piece, is improvement systems and how you improve. And as we all know, any improvement system worth its salt exists for one reason and one reason only: to help organizations better serve customers. And I don't think we can ever lose sight of that very important fact. And it is because customers are the raison d'etre of quality that our guest on today's show has quickly become one of my favorite writers. Annette Franz-Glenecki is the Director of Customer Experience Management Strategy at Confirmit, and her latest article, What is the Third Rail of Customer Experience?, appeared in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. So, joining us now to talk about this idea and the care and feeding of customers in general is Annette Franz-Glenecki. Annette, welcome to the show.
Good morning. I'm so happy to join you on this topic. This is a great topic. I'll take any chance to spread the word about the importance of focusing on the customer experience.
Yeah, no, I think we're the same way. I think we all agree that customers are definitely where it's at, and it's why we all do what we do. Well,
yep.
Let's start a little bit with some definitions. Anyone out there who maybe doesn't know the reference, fill us in on the meaning of the third rail. What does that mean?
Well, the third rail comes from, obviously, the railway systems, and that's the rail that supplies electricity, to the trains. And it's the one that, it's always the one that we see in movies. It's like, oh, don't touch the third rail, you're going to fry. So it's a very charged, in this world, a very charged topic, right? So any topic that is potentially dangerous or could lead to career death or just, being banished to the corner and never to speak to you again is a topic that's referred to as a third rail. It's really used a lot here in the U.S. In politics, and I think Social Security, for example, is a topic that is considered a third rail topic. So, and I thought it was just an interesting approach to looking at customer experience, because we do have a lot of topics in this space, in this effort, in these strategies that people don't want to talk about, don't want to address.
Yeah, they don't want to address them, but I think we all understand that they're important, because obviously, third rail means something that's important. A third rail isn't something that's unimportant, yet you don't talk about it. It's stuff that needs to be talked about but isn't. So in your piece, what I loved about your piece, which I thought was great, was you pass along the thoughts of a lot of leading customer experience practitioners like yourself about what they believe constitutes the third rail in this field of customer performance and customer excellence. So which of those statements really resonated most with you?
I like the one by James Lawther. He and I, for whatever reason, always seem to click. When he writes a blog post, I always go, aha, I wish I would have thought it, to write that, because we always seem to click. And he really had a great topic for his piece in there, and it's about the executives. And I'll just real quickly read what he said, because it really, brings home the point about executives and the topic of, the importance of the executives to actually executing your strategies to, facilitate a great customer experience and all of that. And so he basically said that, the executives are the third rail because they want to focus on looking good themselves, about their own prestige, about meeting their targets, about making sure they get their bonuses and their, BMWs, and nobody has the guts to go and say, hey, executives, you're the problem. And as a matter of fact, one of the comments that he made on a previous blog post of mine where I had written about how to get executive buy-in, his comment on that blog post was, maybe it's time for some new executives. So if they don't get it, or if that's not a conversation that you can have with them about the importance of customer experience and their involvement in making sure that that happens, maybe it's time for some new executives. I thought that was really clever.
So, Annette, let me ask you a question, and let me do it in a way that connects something else that you wrote for us last month. You wrote an article entitled "What Trumps a Great Customer Experience?" and you wrote very persuasively, backed up with some studies, that the customer experience is really enhanced dramatically by the employee experience.
That's right.
And one of my favorite local Seattle businessmen is Howard Schultz, CEO of Starbucks, and he wrote in there that he said, if people relate to the company they work for, if they form an emotional tie to it and buy into its dreams, they will pour their hearts into making it better.
Absolutely.
Okay, so how does the employee experience relate to or connect to this idea of a third rail for the customer experience?
Well, I think, in my experience, and I've been in this industry, voice of the customer and focusing on improving customer experiences and employee experience for over 20 years. And, my experience has always been that when we talk to clients about the customer experience, we always say, hey, listen, you've got to listen to your employees. You've got to improve the employee experience, because happy employees, and there's research out there that shows that happy employees equals engaged employees, engaged customers successful business. And it's always been, oh, we'll listen to the employees another time. It's not our focus right now. We'll do that later. And really, what's ended up happening, here we are 20 plus years later, and we're seeing research from companies like Gallup who say that employee engagement is at an all-time low. And, so that's a problem. And the other problem is, companies think that, I think there's still issues around what does employee engagement mean. First of all, what is employee engagement? And then, making that connection to how it drives a great customer experience. And a lot of companies think that employee engagement means, hey, we've thrown a party, we've got free food for you, we've given you health insurance, you've got vacation, what more do you need? Why aren't you happy, And there's more to it than that. Employee engagement is really a two-way street. The conditions have to be right, the stars have to be aligned, but it's not impossible, right? You've got to make sure you hire the right people, and you've got to make sure that your organization facilitates the employee becoming engaged. And a lot of that has to do with making sure that they understand their contribution, letting them know that their contributions matter, communication. We can have a whole conversation around employee engagement, but I think that's a big part of it, is really companies not really understanding what employee engagement really is and what it means and how to achieve that, and then making that connection to the customer experience.
And Ed, it's always struck me that people in business many times look at their customers in very much the wrong way. I mean, essentially dollar signs, whether it's commissions
Yes.
or revenue for the company. But I think if you have the right kind of relationship, maybe you agree with us, if you have the right kind of relationship with your customers, they can be a lot more than that. For instance, they can really be your best possible critic of your process, kind of like the canary in the coal mine for what you're doing. So do you think there's certain reluctance in some circles to look at customers in that way?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think we see that a lot of companies are listening to customers. There's some Gartner research that's been out there for forever that basically says that 98% of companies listen to their customers, and I think that's the start, right? You can go into any store, any event, any whatever, and you'll get a post-event or post-transactional survey asking you for your feedback. Some of that is lip service. Actually, a lot of it is lip service because they're, collecting feedback. I call it collecting feedback, just like, we collect stamps, right? Put it in a book and put it away. The important thing is if we're listening to our customers, that we actually do something with it, right? The action is just as important, if not more important, than actually listening to our customers. So I think people, for the most part, understand that we need to listen to our customers. They don't put necessarily as much weight on it as they should in terms of turning that into action and into process improvement. The other thing is that, going back to your question, is that if you have those raving fans, and they complain or they call customer service or they give you bad marks or whatever, really, if you've got that level of customer engagement, your customers really want you to succeed. I don't think any customer wants, their favorite brand to fail, right? So they will provide feedback, and they will do that in an effort to help the brand succeed. So I think that's an important thing that we need to remember. The flip side of that is that there's still some people out there who think customers don't know what they want, right? There's the old Ford quote, right? That if I'd have asked them what they wanted, they'd have said they wanted faster horses, right? So there's still that segment of the businesses out there that think that customers don't really know what they want, and we don't need to listen to them. So.
And in many ways, in the high-tech field, that's particularly true. The late Steve Jobs,
Yep.
He was famous for saying, "Look, customers don't know what they want until we show them."
Absolutely.
And really talking about the role of innovation, and we're the ones that are the forward-looking ones, and the way it's said is presented, very clearly with a lot of ego behind it.
Yep. And what's so funny is, going back to Ford's quote, is that the automotive manufacturers are huge on listening to their customers, right? They are, I started my career in this space at J.D. Power and Associates, and they really, really want to know what their customers think. So it's an interesting flip there from what Ford had said. So,
Sure.
But I agree with you. Steve Jobs is probably the classic modern day example of that.
Well, Annette, we could talk about this topic, I know, for a lot longer than the 10 minutes we have today. So I want to definitely invite you back to join us again. But thank you for providing some really great articles recently, not just this first one, but not just this latest one, but many for the last couple of weeks. And we want to continue to have you on the show. So we'll look forward to having you again back soon.
Thank you. I'd love to join again. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette.
Thanks again, Annette.
Bye.
We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Good stuff there, Jeff. I think I think that's why we're all in business, right? Is to understand customers and understand how to serve them better, right?
Yeah, and I think that Annette's point was particularly strong. I wish I could sort of bottle it up and use it as a magic potion. I mean, I've had so many people say when they're trying to improve their customer service strategy, we talk about getting together some type of focus group. You said, well, why would my customers give us the time? And what Annette said was very clear. They want you to succeed. They know your success is going to be in their favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And good customers know that, and good companies know that they have to be drawing that kind of information out of their customers. It's part of their culture. And using that as a segue, let's talk a little bit more about culture and about changing corporate culture, maybe specifically about some of the bottlenecks that I think prevent large enterprises from achieving breakthrough innovation. Jeff, why do you think that it's so hard for these big companies to change?
Well, it leads into a great article that appeared this week by Matthew May, and to change a culture, change the system. Now, a couple of things about this. I love Matthew May's writing. He's written for us, I counted up, 28 times, 28 articles. And he really takes a bit of a shot at what many consider sort of the current management rage of focusing on the power of distinctive corporate culture as the, not a, but the key enabler of constant and rapid innovation. And what I like about this article is that he really questions this. His title, as well as his very last sentence, is straight out of Deming. If you want to change the culture, focus on the system. And it was very heartening to me to see a sort of almost a contrarian view when it comes to culture, because even at the recent ASQ summit, they were really focusing in on this issue of culture, and I think it left people a little bit confused as to how it kind of fits into the whole picture. So let's start off with a little bit of background that Matthew goes through about systems thinking. So one of the great systems thinkers, perhaps of the modern industrial age, is Thomas Edison. And when he invented the incandescent light bulb, he knew, and we know this from his writings, that it would not change the world on its own. That invention was not going to revolutionize it. Because why? Because there was an entrenched system in place, a very well-funded industry, the gas lighting industry, the existing way that you had light and power brought into your homes. And he knew that little invention of his would in nowhere impact that. But he knew the real solution was to create an overall system of on-demand lighting and power to everyone. So what he did is invent, and I actually quite favor this phrase, it's a somewhat new phrase, he invented a new ecosystem. In 3 years, with mostly just his own money, he invented an entire electric power system. And when I say entire, I mean the trenches, the digging machines, the generators, the wire, the insulation around the wires, the sockets, the lamps, the meters, the switches, the whole gamut, the generators, as part of this entire system. He proved that it could work. He proved that it was a fraction of the cost of the existing structure, and the demise of the gas lighting industry then began at a very rapid pace. So let's look at a little more modern example. I just mentioned Steve Jobs earlier. The late Steve Jobs was credited with such rapid innovation, the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, and so on. Now, about a dozen years ago when the iPod came to the fore, it did not by itself disrupt the industry, and he knew that. There were, in fact, many other devices out there that were music players. It was nothing new. Now, granted, the iPod was more elegant, it was simpler, it was cleaner and more attractive, but by itself, it was not a new category of invention. But what was lethal in changing, disrupting the industry, was the software for the desktop, iTunes, plus, most importantly, most people forget this, all the business deals that surrounded the integration of and the settling of questions about royalty payments to the musicians and the music companies, that allowed the simple exploration of music and purchase of music online. And it just literally wiped through the industry and created lots of disruption. Now, not all of us are good systems thinkers. The classic example is the 1994 opening of the new Denver International Airport, and they had a baggage system. What you're looking at here on the screen is their $700 million baggage system, miles of track, cart-to-computer communication via radio signals, and it was just an amazing and ambitious system that was designed. However, it didn't work. In fact, it delayed the opening of the airport for over a year. And I remember the TV crews covering this because they were watching, and it was hilarious to them. They were just splitting at the sides when they would watch these carts overthrow the baggage from where it was supposed to go. It would land in the track with the next cart, and another cart would run it over and split open the suitcase. So here was, fast forward to $1 billion, and 10 years later, and then the COO of United Airlines, the chief operating officer, said, "We've come to the conclusion," this was in 2005, that a manual system is best. So that is a manual system is still a system. So the point here is that, yes, Edison was brilliant at systems thinking, so is Jobs, but not necessarily all of us. Because as he writes, systems thinking is not really intuitive. We're not trained in it. We're not part of our formal education. It doesn't come naturally to the way human beings tend to think. So let's talk about culture now, the other side of the article. 10 years ago, the Columbia Space Shuttle exploded over Texas. And the report from the Columbia Accident Investigation Board was very clear. They put the blame, and listen to these phrases, as a broken safety culture, as a can-do culture, we can do anything, and this is a perfect place culture. In other words, whatever we do comes out of here, whatever technical engineering developments are about as perfect as they'll get. And but here's Matthew's point, is that the remedies that they came up with in this report were all revolved around bolstering systems and structures. The report did not deal with how to change culture. So what he writes is that it's very easy to focus on culture, but in fact the real solutions to preventing or solving problems are much more systemic in nature. And and he talks further about these small entrepreneurial outfits, such as that are highly innovative and creative and have a lot of customer focus. And why do they lose that focus as they become larger and more bureaucratic? And he refers to that as the big company syndrome, and then talks about ways in which you can help to prevent that from taking over, because it's a lot easier to build and create that innovative attitude and culture than it is to try to recapture it after you've got that big company syndrome in place. So the bottom line here is that the key to changing the culture is to not try to change it directly, not attack it directly. And Mike, we've talked about this a lot on the show. Because why? I mean, it's so obvious. You attack it directly, it tends to cause people to react in a defensive way, and they tend to hold on to that old culture, that old set of attitudes even tighter. So to change the culture, he says, in a stealthy way, my words, are to really focus on changing the system. So he promises a part 2 to this, which is going to get, I think, more into the how-tos. I look forward to the debate of this culture versus systems thinking approach and how they interrelate. And is there a chicken and an egg relationship here, or is there an actual order in which these things should happen? Should systems thinking come before culture?
Great point, Jeff, and great article. And we've talked about it ourselves offline too. The idea that we're a small organization and it's not always easy to inject innovation and achieve lasting, impactful change. And gosh, thinking about it from the perspective of one of these large multinational enterprises, it's almost impossible to believe that you could actually have innovation. I mean, Matthew talks in his article a little bit about what happens with projects where, many times projects are launched kind of as a favor from one manager to the next, and they begin to proliferate and the requirements get larger, and at some point top management steps in and says, wait a minute, this is way too expensive, we don't see any benefit, and they slow it down and throw up these roadblocks. And that whole process, which is happening every day in these organizations, just chokes off innovation, I think, in these large organizations.
That's right. And I remember Tom Peters was giving a talk, this is some years ago, and I practically fell out of my chair. And he talked about, no middle manager should be promoted unless they can demonstrate that they've had at least a couple big failures in their career. Because, if you're going to innovate, it's going to require risk. Risk implies that not everything's going to succeed. You're going to have some failures. So if you can't show any big failures in your history, it means you're not taking risks, and if you're not taking risks, there's no way that you can truly innovate at a rapid pace.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Jeff, and I think that's a good point to think about, because all of us are in that same boat, right? I mean, we want to innovate if we can, but it's not always easy, right? I mean, again, especially for large organizations, much less small ones, to really have that kind of breakthrough innovation is always a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Well, that's our show for this week, but before we go, I want to make sure we thank our guest, Annette Franz-Glenecki, for joining us. Thank you, Jeff, as well, for being for kind of sitting in there for Dirk. I think that was great. You did a great job for Dirk. He's off there in Disneyland, as we know. Also want to send a shout out to our sponsor. There's Dirk again. Also want to send out a shout out to our sponsor, Hexagon Metrology. Hexagon is committed to helping you control your processes, enhance the quality of your products, and increase efficiencies. They empower you to stay one step ahead of a changing world with their wide range of product offerings, nearly 200 years of expertise, and an extensive support network. Hexagon Metrology, where quality comes together. So for more information on Hexagon, just click right below or just to the right of the player page right down there.
And we want to close out the show with another episode of Ponderings, our 3-minute little segments where our friend Mike Mickelwright, who's now in Germany, by the way, on a business trip, gives some perspectives this week on waste. We'll see you next week, everyone.
Yes, thank you all for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we'll leave you with Mike Mickelwright.
Did you ever wonder why waste is called waste? I think that when you eat or drink too much food or drinks, which is all inventory, and you do so all in one sitting, it doesn't all get digested at the same time, and it settles right here at your waist. My waist is full, or I'm wasteful, with excess inventory right around my waist. I'm working on getting rid of the waste around my waist. You know all the waste, depending on how you count them. There's 7 or 8 wastes. There's defects, overproducing, waiting, transportation, inventory, motion, excess processing, and the biggest waste of all, treating people like parameciums, which are single-celled organisms that by themselves have no brain and no skills. Are these all of the wastes? Oh no, there's plenty more, like resource waste, meeting waste, email waste, and of course, politics. If you are a non-smoker, smoking would be considered a waste. If you are a smoker, leaving this half-smoked cigar would be a waste. If you are a non-drinker, getting wasted would be a waste. If you are a drinker, leaving this unfinished glass of brandy at the bar would be a waste. In lean, We use the Japanese word muda instead of waste. Isn't it wasteful to have two words that mean the same thing? Or should I say, isn't it mudaful? We've got perfectly good, useful English words, but somehow they mean so much more when we use the equivalent Japanese words. No one would ever show up for a continuous improvement event, but everyone wants to take part in a Kaizen event. Everyone should be charged with not managing waste, but eliminating waste. And instead of calling them employees or associates, call them cool names like wastinators, garbage disposers, or waste watchers. I'm the wise guy, Mike Mickelwright.
One, fire.